the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and today we're going to pop over to the Big Apple to speak with Kristin Mathis, scholar of ancient religion and magic, who is in charge of a very dynamic substack called Mysteria Mundi. Kristin, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here. I love what you're doing with Mysteria Mundi and these slow
Thank
drips
you.
of Orphic hymns coming out, just kind of letting everyone have it wash over their brain. And what you're doing with those is just so powerful in the community.
Thank you.
I know you're not an astrologer per se, but that you read astrological texts. So when I ask you this question, I'm not going to say what was your first astrology book? But I would ask maybe, what was your first book about astrology that you came across in your research?
Well, I was writing my senior thesis at Brown as an undergrad, and my thesis was on Roman magic in a particular text. And I was trying to track down the transmission of different types of esoteric knowledge from Alexandria to Rome. This would have been, 1993. And so it was a time when the scholarship out there on ancient magic, ancient esoterica, was nowhere near as fulsome as it is today. And there were only a handful of academics all over the world working on magic. And so it was also, digital databases were just getting off the ground. And a lot of my work was in actual big, old, dusty volumes of work that I would have to cart off, and put on my library carrel. So I was trying to track down the transmission of this data, and I kept encountering this name, Thrasyllus, who was a court astrologer, and his son, his son Babylonia, who was also a court astrologer. And I wound up finding a list in a later Byzantine text that cataloged Thrasyllus's library. And in that library were various astrological books of Nicepso and Petasiris and other names that are now familiar to people as a result of work done by people like Chris Brennan and Dimitri George and other folks. But at the time, it was so obscure that my regular thesis advisor didn't have anything to add or say, or couldn't give me any information. And so I went and knocked on the door of David Pingree, who was teaching at Brown at the time and who I'd taken some classes with, but wasn't technically my thesis advisor. And I've told this story elsewhere, but it just sums up a whole world to me. I went over to the Department of Egyptology and up to his office door, which was in his old house, and, wooden door, and knock on the door. And he says, "Come in." And the door opens and there's just this big table in a room full. I mean, the room could have been from Hogwarts, right? It was full of old wooden bookcases and wood paneling, lined with all these books in Greek, in Sanskrit, in, cuneiform, in every ancient language, of course, Latin as well. And Pingree was sitting there with this beatific smile on his face, reading some book in Sanskrit. And he would always do this. I remembered this from when he would teach classes. Whenever he'd give us a test or something, he'd just whip out a Sanskrit manuscript and sort of sit there with this. And so I burst in, he's reading this thing, and I say to him, "Professor Pingree, what can you tell me about Babylonia? And do you think he would have inherited Thrasyllus's library in the court?"
I mean, that's the first question I'd ask, right? "Hi, what do you think about Babylonia?" I love that.
He was he didn't even break stride. He just put his book down and he was like, Oh, well, I definitely think that he would have had his father's books. Of course, then, he went on to become the head of the Library of Alexandria. So he would have also brought his own books over. And he just gives me this like complete answer. And I, run out back to my little library, Carol, and I like jot down all the information and, take notes on it so I can use it in my thesis. Like, that's how I got started.
Amazing. Oh, I'm having beginning story envy because and then also like the Kevin Bacon, having he removed, like you were
right
there with Pingree. Wow, what a magic moment.
Yeah, seriously magic moment. And I've never outgrown that first just those enchanted hours in my library, Carol, with dusty books about Hermeticism, alchemy, astrology. I've just never outgrown the magic of that. And here I am.
Wow. Okay. Well, I can't send you away with an ephemeris, but I will, the show is about asking you to like pick 3 books to take in a remote journey. Yes. If I were to send you away on a remote journey and you could only take 3 books with you, what would they be?
First one's an easy one, which is that I'd take a copy of the Orphic Hymns. I'm not sure if I can cheat on this or not, right? Because what I'd want to take with me is my favorite edition, Greek edition of the hymns, which is by Gabriella Ricciardelli. She's an Italian scholar, and her edition of the Greek Orphic Hymns is, widely considered to be the best, and it's in Italian. But luckily for me, I went to high school in New Jersey where Italian is part of the high school curriculum, so no problem.
Wait. So, how many languages do you speak? Or interface with, right?
Interface with, I don't know, French, Italian, Spanish, Greek, a little bit of Latin.
Amazing.
I can make my way through very, very, very elementary New Kingdom hieroglyphics. A little bit of German, but that's cool. Like, it sounds impressive, but it's actually just what they make you do when you're doing grad school in classics. You get a PhD. So yeah. So I would take her edition, and then if I didn't have access on this hypothetical island to a Greek lexicon, I would take a copy of Liddell and Scott's big, massive Greek lexicon.
This one?
Yes. Is that the big one or is that the mid-size? I can't see.
I don't know. It says volume 2.
That's volume 2. Yes.
And there's a volume 1 right next to it that says A through K. But I don't think that's the American A. I think it's a Greek A, right? It's got to be.
Yeah, it's a Greek A. Yeah, Alpha through Kappa.
I never quite understood that because I'm like, what's going on with this? So the 2-volume set is here. Yeah, that's fair to say.
So I would take that one.
Those are the 2 biggest. Those are the biggest books anyone's ever decided to take with them. They count as one. I would say they count as one.
Yeah. So those would be, because then I could continue doing my work, which is translating the Orphic Hymns.
You could take the island as a vacation, though. I'm just kidding. Right. I'm just like you. I love this. You're just like, all I need is the Orphic Hymns and a lexicon, and I'm happy. Don't even need a third book.
Exactly. What else would I take? Just for me personally, just because I love Sappho, I would take the Fragments of Sappho in Greek. My preferred English translation is Anne Carson, but I like doing my own translations, and I've done some of those in the past, of Sappho,
Yeah.
So, I think I'd take Greek.
Imagine stepping into a room of 5,000 astrology books, turning a corner and stepping into a room of 2,000 more. The Celestial Arts Education Library is every astrologer's dream, and it can be yours. I invite you to come support CAELi before you can visit physically. Your support will mean the creation of 52 new episodes of Within Orb next year, 4 issues of the CAELi Review, our inaugural journal, and countless book talks, events, classes for our community. Visit our website, www.caeli.institute/support, to select your level of care. Please help support CAELi into the future, our future, so that we may study the future together. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the show. So, Orphic hymns, I mean, you're one of the world's foremost experts of them, and so let's break down a little bit of the relationship between the cosmology and the astrology and the magic and all of this beautiful mixture of culture embedded in them that you're bringing forward.
Yeah. Well, I guess the place that I usually start is by, first of all, clarifying a couple things. Just who was Orpheus? Orpheus, many of us know, if we know Orpheus at all, we know the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, where he loses his wife or girlfriend Eurydice to death, and then he goes down to the underworld and brings her back and then looks at her and she disappears. So that's part of the Orpheus myth, is his familiarity with the underworld because he went and tried to rescue Eurydice. But what was even more important to the ancient Greeks, or what he was most known for in ancient Greece, is his ability to sing the songs of the cosmos, and to use those songs, or his singing of those songs could enchant the cosmos. Right? So he was both singing of and to and, and for the cosmos. And his songs had the capacity to literally change how the cosmos was formed, or how it wove itself together. So the stories that are told in myth are his ability to enchant trees or stones or animals. He could enchant gods and fearsome creatures or dangerous creatures like the sirens or dragons. And to make a long story very short, he is also said to have founded the mystery traditions. And through those mystery traditions, we came to possess a set of hymns, 87 of them, that were said to be written by Orpheus. And they were used ritually to help guide initiates through an experience of the cosmos that was designed to sort of reposition their fate within the cosmic web. Right? So for the Orphics, fate isn't some decree that's handed down. It's a weaving together of the cosmos, the stars, the plants, the animals, the stones, human beings, all of us weaving together all the time, dynamically. And by changing some part of that, or tweaking some part of that, it was believed that the whole thing would change. And, to my mind, this sounds very contemporary in a lot of ways, right? Like with quantum physics and, chaos theory and the butterfly's wings causes a hurricane somewhere else. It resonates with many of our contemporary scientific beliefs. They used mythological language to describe everything, really, but to describe things that we might describe in scientific terms. So they used these hymns through rituals that reenacted the song and dance to remind themselves that they are children of earth and starry sky. That's the phrase that they used, to be a child of earth and starry sky. And that in remembering our relationship and our place in the cosmos as a child of the cosmos, we have the capacity to escape a cycle of life and death that keeps repeating, and to be released and rejoin in a more the language here always gets really tricky because our English just doesn't want to do what Greek wants to do. I was about to say rejoin the one, rejoin the cosmic all, but to even say rejoin implies that we left it. And the point of the Orphics is that we never left it. We're always already part of this cosmic weaving. But sort of the tragedy of being human is that we have forgotten. And so by engaging in these rituals and singing these hymns, we come to remember ourselves, to recompose ourselves as part of the living cosmos that we already are part of.
Yeah. Yeah. This weaving metaphor, when you're saying it, I'm seeing this kind of actual threading through in each of these strands, this animal, that stone, this hymn, that sound coming forth, and the focus of the ritual and the human doing that, and you get this kind of tapestry's too one-dimensional, but some kind of like garment or something that has dimension that is also with the thread coming through, the threads of fate, etc. And then that makes me think like, oh, my instinct to call planets in your chart snags has a deeper foundation, actually, because if you've got a planet somewhere, it's not that it's a powerful thing, it's the problem you're working on.
Yeah, I love that, because I have described it before as almost like, imagine a three-dimensional weaving. Often in the Greek of the hymns, they describe night as having a peplos, or a skirt, like a twirling skirt, like that of a dancer, right? So imagine this three-dimensional weaving thing that's moving. The planets, or the positions of the different fixed stars, they're like little nodes, or actually sort of like shining sequins or bangles on this skirt of the night. And the Orphic hymn to the stars has this really cute image that I love, where it talks about the stars as being the children of night. And as night is twirling and dancing, the children are dancing under her skirt. Almost like I was a kindergarten teacher at one point, and the kindergarten teachers, you wear a skirt and the kids are like up, clinging to your legs and underneath and running around, and and that's sort of the planets, right? These twinkly-toed dancers under the skirt of night.
Yeah, but then you get born and your consciousness descends into human matter, and then the planet that was there at that time snags the skirt down, and then you have to work on repairing it with theurgy, right?
Yeah, yeah. And what I love about the Orphics is that there are some later Greek ideas about falling and descending out of, sort of the high realms into the lower realms. And the Orphics don't really use that language. So they would say that being in a human body limits our ability to perceive what already is. We already are part of the all, right? We already are one with the all. But our human bodies limit our ability to perceive that. So it's not that we used to be and then we fell and we have to work our way back up, which is a much later antique, also Christian, or monotheist, I should say, perception of that, probably beginning with Plato and going out from there. But the Orphics, being pre-Platonic, are preserving a much more ancient, archaic Greek understanding of the cosmos, where we don't have that separation. We have the perception of separation. And we need to remember that we already are part of the one. And I find that really compelling. I just can never get over how gorgeous that is.
I love that.
There's so much love in that view. We don't need to try to be other than what we are. We already are.
All of us.
Yeah, all of us. It's very collective, as well. Like, as an individual, I can connect with the all, but it's the collective endeavor. Initiation was something you did in a group. The dances are choral dances. even when there's one person maybe taking the spotlight or, at a particular moment, the whole community of initiates are there watching you and holding the space for you. I feel like this is a really healing medicine for the time we're in right now in terms of our relationship with, the natural world and our relationship with community and relating to each other out of a place of assuming connection rather than assuming opposition and fighting.
Sure. Sure. So I have a question about
Yeah.
this in the ritual engagement, because if one is already showing up as themselves as a modern person, I don't mean modern as in modernism, I mean as in like alive right now person,
Yeah.
and wanting to do planetary magic, and then you hear all of these people say, we'll say the Orphic hymn to whatever planet, and I'm like, but why are we pretending to be ancient Greek people when we can show up for that planet as ourselves? So is there what is the pushback? If you're like Professor Mathis pushing back against Rebel Jenn, like, tell me what's
Yes.
wrong with that idea.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it actually is really important to show up as ourselves and bring our own contemporary awareness and problems and questions and cognitions and intuitions about the planet. So I would say it's a both and. I think that in addition to these modern or our own contemporary perceptions and understandings, it's helpful to go back because the Orphics were drawing themselves on, I mean, they explicitly owned that they were drawing on very, very ancient Egyptian and Babylonian, Phoenician temple traditions. So we're talking about literally thousands of years of human history of interacting with stars that, were being drawn upon to help craft the language and understanding of the hymns. And so by engaging with them, we have like a direct line to this ancestral lineage of stargazers who predate a lot of what many astrologers, even the texts that astrologers work from that we consider to be old, like Vettius Valens or something, that's several centuries after. I mean, 400 or 500 centuries after the Orphic material is being formulated. You know, and then the Orphics are drawing on traditions that are literally 2,000-3,000 years old, or than that.
So don't pass up this spiritual technology.
Right, exactly. Yes, you said it. So, and don't pass up this spiritual technology. And there's so much beauty in it. Just the imagery itself. I can never get enough of how beautiful the language is and how much it leads me into a deeper connection with the stars and with also the wisdom of working with particular stars. So, for instance, I'll give you two examples, maybe. First example is the planet Mars. The Orphic hymn to Mars, at least, in my translation, I've tried to keep the tone of the original language. And the tone of the original language in Greek is as a wording spell. It opens with a long list of all the sort of murderous mayhem that Mars can cause. And then it stops and uses the language of that is found in Greek magical texts. And it says, stop, don't do this, stop your murder. Instead, and then it gives him three alternatives. You can go partying with Dionysus. You can, lay in the beds of Aphrodite, or you can put your hands to the works of Demeter. So it is structured like a magical spell where it says, I call on you. Here's what you normally do. Stop doing that. Do this instead. And the three remedies that are given are remedies that have echoes in later astrological material, right? Like to Jupiter and Venus, right? Dionysus and Aphrodite are the benefics that, when you're in close Mars with those benefics, there's an apotropaic effect. He's softened by those. And with the works of Demeter, you think about it's literally like turn your swords into plowshares. Take all that energy, and instead of using it to kill children, this is part of the hymn, instead of using it to kill children, put it to the works of Demeter so that you'll make all the people who care for children happy.
Wow.
So that gives you right there very clear indications for like out of control martial energy. And that's in the hymn.
That's in the hymn, and in the mouth of Rob Hand in a webinar he taught for Kepler once, where he says, if you don't give Mars something to do, he's going to run roughshod. But I'm not sure he was aware of of the source of that in the Orphic hymn.
I don't think he was, because, I don't think most people were, because the way it's been translated into English until now has been only looking at the most exoteric or mythological sort of understandings. And I honestly just feel like I've stumbled into this because since I was trained in the magical language, I recognized it when I saw it in the text. But there's no reason why the average classicist not trained in magical language would necessarily see that there, because it's contained in the Orphics, since they were mysteries, since they were intended to preserve the esoteric for initiates while allowing others to read the material without getting secret. You can read it and it makes sense on this level, but you get a little deeper and you begin to unpack the Greek, and it opens itself up for the initiates. And the Orphics, literally, we have an Orphic papyrus that literally says, for those who open the doors of their ears.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was one example. And the second example I'll give you is one that I made the mistake of. I recently translated the hymn to the Furies. And when I'm translating, these energies are very powerful in my world. And I started translating the hymn because I had a dream about the Furies and them chasing me through the woods, and they were shouting this one word in Greek. And then I hadn't ever looked at the hymn before. I hadn't really looked at it. And I opened up the hymn, and there was that word that they had been shouting in my dream. So anyway, I translate it, and I just started feeling so dysregulated in my body. I have long COVID, but this like flare came out of nowhere. I was just, shaky, and my heart was racing. I was having trouble sleeping. And it took me a few days, I'm ashamed to say, to realize, I've been translating the Furies. And then I thought, I should go back and look and see which hymns they put before and after the Furies, and like look at where it falls in the sequence of hymns. And so I did. And lo and behold, it's bracketed on both sides. The hymn to the Furies is followed by the hymn to the Eumenides. And then they have, on either side of them, there's hymns to health, to sort of cosmic order and law and things like that. And so once I sort of translated the Eumenides and spent time with these other hymns, was like that fury energy was contained. So I think there's still a lot in the hymns that I haven't even uncovered yet. This is a years-long project. That when we have all the hymns translated and we have really engaged with the esoteric content in there, we'll have a lot of really beautiful, tried and true, over many thousands of years, indications for how to work with these energies.
I love that there's a kind of cosmic order in how they're presenting them, as if to say, like, well, we need a benefic enclosure for the Furies because otherwise it's going to be out of control. So like the structure of the text is mirroring the structure of the ideal cosmos so that things stay functional, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And that's sort of what I'd say. Like, people often ask me, well, can you just read one hymn? And yes, you can. And I think they would have used them. They did use them in big communities. I think probably they would have used hymns individually occasionally. But I just think exercise due caution. I've never had any of my students or me personally, for instance, with a hymn like Hygeia, Health. I've never had anybody come back and go like, wow, that Hygeia, that was a really strong hymn that, you know. um,
Yeah.
but I have had people say Sonic Hermes made my days a little weird. So it's like, just use maybe some common sense, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to, like, I have to I guess, but I wanted to translate the Hymn of the Furies. But knowing now what I didn't know then, now I probably would translate the whole sequence as sort of like one go, over a period of 2 days or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And it's only through the experience of doing the work that these insights come, as if it's its own initiation.
Yeah. Oh man, I feel like I've been like through Orphic boot camp these past few years.
Okay, if you ever launch a course once your book comes out, can you please call it that?
Orphic boot camp.
I would sign up for that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you want to speak a little bit about Sappho, that's cool. But I don't mind that we spent the entire time, on top of each volume of the lexicon interfacing about these in the process of being translated Orphic hymns. That's just so awesome. I mean, when I was finishing my book about Walter Benjamin and astrology that got published in French before it hasn't even come out in English yet, I read Benjamin talks a little bit about Goethe in his early works, and then I had to go back and read Goethe on the Orphic hymns as well. And I'm like, man, I wish I had met Kristin before I had filed my thesis in 2012, because I think that would have been a part of it, and it didn't end up getting to be a part of it. But, Goethe himself was interested in astrology and also very well known for his work with the Orphic hymns. And I'm wondering if even Germans at that time had an idea that there was a link between that and astrology, or some kind of astrological cosmology.
For sure. I think that, when we go back, like the reception history of the Orphic hymns, right? So like Ficino and Pico della Mirandola in the courts of Florence in the Renaissance, they were very aware of the overlap in the Orphic hymns and astrology, and the whole history of Western esotericism, including Islamicate esotericism, right? I feel like I need to emphasize that, because sometimes in astrological communities, it's talked about as though Islamicate is somehow separate or
a polyp.
Right. Yeah.
Some sort of over there, right? Still
right.
othered.
Right. Exactly. But the Orphics are far enough back that there is nobody in Greco-Roman, Arabic, Christian, Jewish tradition who's not influenced by them, either directly because the hymns were widely circulated, or indirectly because they're reading people who read the hymns. Plato, the Orphic cosmology is all over Plato. The Pythagoreans, all of these foundational esoteric movements draw on them. And they drew in turn on Egypt and Babylon, as well as perhaps, there's some indication that there may be connections to Vedic texts. Yeah, I'm still would want to see more evidence about that. But.
Sure. Yeah. So one last question before we go into the exit of this. Do you think that there's a difference reading them in Greek versus reading them in a translation of any kind? Like, do you think that maybe the spiritual technology functions best if one can say the words in order with the right sounds in the Greek language?
I find that reading them in English, it has an effect for me. I guess my intuition and my experience is that it's the level of feeling and what the Greeks would call like thumos, like your heart energy, that is the connection. And so I'm not going to rule out that doing them in Greek maybe gives an extra boost or something, but I really feel like the cosmos speaks to us in whatever language we can hear it in. So it speaks to us in Greek, but it also speaks to us in English and Chinese and,
And
whatever
birds.
language, and birds. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something I just learned the other day, was that there are a number of Egyptian texts that refer to baboons chattering when the sun rises as a secret hymn to Ra that the baboons sing every morning, that
Aww.
only Ra himself and the pharaoh can understand. Isn't that
That
gorgeous?
is so cool.
And it's like, I don't doubt that, right? Like, why do baboons chatter every sunrise? Why couldn't it be because they're speaking the language of the cosmos?
Yeah,
We're all already part of the cosmos. So why not? Why isn't my cat lying in a sunbeam actually a form of sun worship?
there you go. Makes me think of how falcons wake up screaming. You know.
Yeah.
I want to be in that religion. Awesome. Okay, so I normally ask people what astrology books would you recommend for beginners, but now I'm going to pivot a little bit because of your background and say, like, what books would you recommend for someone to get into the scholarship about these cosmologies and astrologies?
Well, a lot of them are very academic books.
Yeah.
The ones that I tend to draw on. But there's a few that I think are really very good academically and also very accessible. So one of them, I have two here. One is called When They Severed Earth from Sky, and it's by a couple, both of them, their last name is Barber and Barber, and it is about the process that early humans used to understand the skies and the cosmology through myth. So they are anthropologists and scientists, and they basically unpack a lot of different myths from different cultures around the world and show how the myths contain astronomical teachings in them. And I love that. I mean, there are other books that have done similar work, but they're older and maybe not quite as contemporary in their understanding. Like one that maybe some esotericists have read, there's one called Hamlet's Mill, that's a famous book about how constellation configurations are preserved in myth. But this one, When They Severed Earth from Sky, is a really great way to begin to understand how to read myth if you're coming at it as an astrologer or magical practitioner or astro magician. It gives you new windows. And then the other one that I would recommend, which I love, 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 even though it's a little old at this point, is by E.C. Krupp, and it's called Echoes of the Ancient Skies. And it has all these wonderful little diagrams in it, but it goes through everything from Chinese myth to Paleolithic sites to Mayan cosmology. And it basically is just an account of how humans over the eons have represented and tracked the skies. And so I learned a lot from it. I mean, I learned a lot about a lot of things from it, but one of the things that I feel like we maybe don't keep in mind enough as contemporary astrologers is how observation based the ancients were. They were looking at the sky, they were watching the horizon, and we acknowledge that. But then because our own form of astrology relies on birth charts and computers, and we sort of lose sight of the practice of sky observation. And the Echoes of the Ancient Skies really, like, I was so pumped when I finished reading that book. I went out on my terrace and tried to like construct a little cosmo vision, like way of keeping track of the sky by drawing in Sharpie on my terrace.
Yeah, I love that. Or my colleague Gemini Brett says, like, you can also check things like declination through your window with a Sharpie, right? Because you can say, okay, it's 8 p.m. and the sun is here, and then do it again the next day. And it's like, oh, 1 dot down,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly. So that, and also just to help us appreciate how much our ancestors knew, that just because we don't know something doesn't mean they didn't.
Right.
And the wonder and mystery of that, I think, can sort of revitalize our own practice when we're feeling dry. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's super inspirational, and it makes me think differently about the Orphic hymns, actually, because I was very much coming at it from like I can cosplay as an ancient Greek person, but I'm Jenn, and it's like, well, okay, but now that it's, such drawing upon such ancient lineage, it's like, no, go back and appreciate them for themselves, and then maybe if you're doing Mars work, you might actually end up reading the Orphic hymn to Mars in the end,
Yeah, and I feel like it's never an either or, right? It's a both and. And the goal is never to recreate the ancient context. I mean, number one, who wants to go back to that type of like patriarchal chattel slave owning culture of the ancient world, right? No.
Don't take it too literally, y'all.
Right. Like really no, right? I mean, because especially with the alt-right sort of ascendancy right now, I think it's really important to say, like, the goal is not to recreate some perfect path. But that said, the wisdom in these hymns is tremendous. And I think not engaging with them, we lose an opportunity to rediscover ourselves as children of earth and starry sky.
So where can someone find you?
I am mostly on Substack. Mysteria Mundi, that's substack.com, is where I post my translations as I'm doing them. And I usually do monthly live chats with my sustaining subscribers. I'm on Blue Sky, but you're just as likely to get a picture of my cat as you are some deep thought.
Yes, because your cat is doing the work too.
Yes.
Amazing.
Over there right now.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Within Orb. And
Hey, thank you, Jenn.
Thanks for listening to Within Orb. If you loved this episode, share it with your friends, give it 5 stars, leave a comment. In Spotify, you can do that now. To learn more about the CAELi Institute and perhaps become a member or take a lab that we teach, please go to CAELi.institute. That's CAELi.institute. Thanks again to the E-Block Band for providing our intro and outro music, and also to Jen Brown of JJ Boots Productions for being an excellent producer. If you would like to have a podcast be edited like Within Orb, reach out to Jen. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next week.